Welcome to Two Perspective Global Conflicts Explained, where history is told. Today, we are looking at the devastating impact of the Japanese Empire on the people of Malaya. However, to fully grasp the extent of the atrocities committed under Japanese rule, it is essential to examine the preceding period of British colonization in Malaya. In the late 18th century, the British East India Company initially arrived in the region for trade, marking the beginning of British presence in Malay territories. Throughout the 19th century, British influence grew substantially as treaties and agreements were forged with Malay sultans. This led to the establishment of British protectorates and the gradual annexation of Malay territories. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, British colonial rule was firmly entrenched across the Malay Peninsula, setting the stage for the emergence of British Malaya. During British colonial rule, Malay society experienced significant transformations. While the traditional social hierarchy led by Malay rulers persisted, the introduction of cash crops such as rubber and tin mining reshaped the economic landscape, leading to the exploitation of Malay labour and resources. The British administration introduced Western education and legal systems, providing some Malays with opportunities for upward mobility, yet perpetuating socio-economic disparities within Malay society. Cultural influences from the West began to permeate Malay life, sparking debates about the preservation of traditional values and identity. Overall, British colonial rule left a complex legacy in Malaysia, marked by both advancements and challenges for the Malay population. However, the following occupation by the Japanese during World War II would make the British look like angels. With that background information, we can now examine the ruthless Japanese imperial occupation of Malaya. Japan invaded Malaya on December 8, 1941, the same day as Pearl Harbor. The Japanese forces, with their signature lightning speed, struck a devastating blow to the British colonial defences. These defences, once thought to be robust, were caught completely off guard. This invasion marked the beginning of Japanese military operations in Southeast Asia during World War II. By February 15, 1942, Japanese forces had successfully defeated British and Allied defences, leading to the surrender of Singapore, which marked the fall of British colonial rule in Malaya. Malaya, with its rich deposits of rubber and tin, was a crucial resource in the machinery of war, its abundance fueling the engines of conflict. The Japanese, now the colonial masters, understood this all too well. Similarly to how they handled their occupation of Korea since 1910, the Imperial Japanese inundated their military officers with complete power of Malay, stripping them of their cultural identity, taking their human and natural resources, while putting in place an education system designed to indoctrinate children with a Japanese ideology and propagandize their right to murder, rape, and pillage the people of Malaya. Almost immediately, thousands of Chinese residents suspected of harboring anti-Japanese sentiments were executed in a chilling act of violence known as the massacre at Bukit Batok. But even this was merely a foreshadowing of the terror to come. In the aftermath of Singapore's fall, the Japanese enacted a ruthless purge among the Chinese population. This period of systematic terror, named the Sukching Massacre, was known by the Japanese as the purification through cleansing. It was a systematic purge of perceived anti-Japanese elements among the Chinese population in Singapore and Malaya. This policy saw tens of thousands of civilians rounded up, interrogated, and summarily executed. The exact numbers remain disputed, but it is believed that tens of thousands perished in this horrific campaign of bloodshed. As horrific as the Sukching Massacre is, it was by no means a rarity. Here are just a few other instances of the Japanese favourite pastime: indiscriminate killing. The Parit Sulong Massacre in 1942. Japanese forces massacred hundreds of Australian and Indian prisoners of war, as well as local Chinese civilians near Parit Sulong in Johor. The Batu Gajah Massacre. In 1942, Japanese troops conducted a massacre in Batu Gajah, Perak, where they killed Chinese civilians suspected of being anti-Japanese sympathizers. The Pudu Jail Massacre, also in 1942. Following the surrender of British and Commonwealth forces in Singapore, Japanese troops rounded up and executed hundreds of prisoners of war and civilians. The Pahang massacres, which took place from 1942 to 1943. In the state of Pahang, Japanese forces conducted multiple massacres of Chinese civilians suspected of anti-Japanese activities. These massacres occurred in various locations across the state and resulted in significant loss of life among the Chinese community. And finally, the Perak massacres, which lasted from 1942 to 1945. Throughout the Japanese occupation of Perak, numerous massacres and atrocities were committed against the civilian population, particularly those of Chinese ethnicity. But the Japanese imperial occupation was not limited to acts of violence. They also exploited the resources of Malay to fuel their war effort. The region's rubber and tin became the lifeblood of the Japanese war machine, and the local population was conscripted into forced labor to extract these resources. The laborers, consisting of Malay, Chinese and Indian civilians, endured grueling conditions and suffered countless casualties in the process. This economic exploitation left the local population impoverished and destitute. The plundering of Malaysia's wealth forced many to endure unimaginable hardships. Yet, in the face of such adversity, the spirit of resistance began to stir. The people of Malay would not be broken so easily. Despite the oppression and terror, a flame of defiance ignited in the hearts of the people. The stage was set for the brave souls who would rise to challenge Japanese oppression. In the face of tyranny, the spirit of resistance burned bright in the hearts of the Malay people. Amid the death of occupation, a beacon of hope emerged, the Malayan people's anti-Japanese army, known as the MPJA. This guerrilla force became a symbol of resilience and resistance against the oppressive Japanese regime. The MPAJA was a motley crew of Malay, Chinese and Indian fighters, united by a common enemy and a shared desire for freedom. They were not professional soldiers, but farmers, laborers and tradespeople, ordinary people who found extraordinary courage in the face of oppression. They sabotaged supply lines, ambushed patrols, and carried out strategic assassinations. Each successful mission was a blow to the Japanese morale and a boost to the oppressed populace, a sign that resistance was not only possible but effective. However, the MPAJA's actions were not without cost. The Japanese retaliated with customary imperial brutality, executing suspected guerrillas and their families. Yet despite the danger, the ranks of the MPAJA continued to swell. The spirit of resistance had taken root, and it was a flame that the Japanese could not extinguish. The MPAJA's fight was not in vain. Their efforts disrupted Japanese operations, weakened their hold on Malaya, and paved the way for the eventual return of the British forces. When the tide of war finally turned, and the Japanese surrendered in 1945, it was the MPAJA who emerged from the jungles, bloodied but unbowed. Their bravery and determination paved the way for the eventual liberation of Malay. On the 15th of August 1945, the world watched as Japan formally surrendered to the Allied powers. The shadow of the rising sun receded from Malaya, and in its place, the Union Jack was hoisted anew. British forces returned to a land scarred by years of occupation, greeted by a people yearning for the familiar yet irrevocably changed by the trials of war. The end of Japanese rule marked not just the close of a dark chapter, but the dawn of a new era for Malaya. Yet the liberation was not without its price. The legacy of the Japanese occupation was a cruel one, etched in the blood and bones of the Malay people. The nation's wealth had been plundered not only by Britain but by Japan, its populace impoverished, and its spirit, though not broken, was battered. As the sun rose on a liberated Malaya, the nation embarked on a journey of healing and rebirth, a journey that would mould it into the vibrant, diverse, beautiful country we know today. Through the many hardships of the Malay people, having faced Japanese occupation, British reoccupation and the birth of Malaysia. Through struggles they stood united, striving for sovereignty. Malaysia emerged as a nation on September 16, 1963, and saw its separation from Singapore in August of 1965. Yet the ties between the two nations, once one people, remain strong. As Malaysians move forward, may their shared history, struggles and triumphs continue to guide them towards everlasting prosperity and peace. The Japanese occupation of Malaya was a dark period in the nation's history, marked by unimaginable hardships and continued brutal atrocities. The Japanese forces brought a reign of terror to the nation. Yet, amidst the oppression, brave souls rose to challenge the tyranny. The Malayan people's anti-Japanese army waged a relentless campaign against the occupiers, leading to the spark of hope that kept the people alive, their will alight, and their struggle to survive ongoing. The people of Malaya were not just bystanders to the conflict, they were its unseen victims, their plight often overlooked in the annals of history. The scars of Japanese atrocities linger in the collective memory of Malays, staining their emotions with sorrow and anguish to this very day. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you haven't already, please consider liking, commenting and subscribing, as this helps the channel immensely. We upload new videos every Tuesday and Saturday. Make sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our future projects. This is Two Perspectives. GCE signing off.